I found the letter in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, wedged between a pizza coupon and my electric bill, and the words "violation notice" in bold red letters immediately made my stomach drop. My name is Adrian Quincy, and I had been living peacefully in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona, for 3 years without a single problem. The neighborhood was nice enough, with its identical beige stucco houses and desert landscaping that the HOA mandated. I kept to myself mostly, worked from home as a software developer, and figured I was doing everything right. Apparently, I was wrong. The letter was from Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. I scanned the formal language and legal jargon until I got to the meat of the complaint. Someone had reported that I was keeping bees on my property without proper approval, which violated Section 7.3.4 of the HOA covenant regarding livestock and agricultural operations. The fine was $500, payable within 30 days or it would increase to $1,000. I stood there in my driveway, sweating in the late April heat, reading the letter 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. Yes, I had bees. 3 hives, to be exact, tucked away in the far corner of my backyard near the oleander bushes. I had set them up 6 months ago after taking a beekeeping class at the local community college. It was supposed to be a hobby, something to get me outside and away from my computer screens. The bees were gentle, productive, and honestly, they had become a source of unexpected joy in my life. I walked back inside and immediately pulled out my copy of the HOA covenant. It was a thick binder I had received when I bought the house, one of those documents you flip through once and then stick on a shelf forever. I found Section 7.3.4 and read it carefully. It prohibited livestock, which it defined as cattle, horses, pigs, goats, sheep, and chickens. There was no mention of bees anywhere in the document. The next morning, I called the HOA office. A woman with a nasal voice answered on the 4th ring. Meadowbrook Hills HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi, this is Adrian Quincy from 4782 Desert Vista Drive. I received a violation notice yesterday about bees, and I wanted to discuss it. There was a pause and the sound of papers shuffling. Yes, Mr. Quincy. Patricia flagged your property. You will need to remove the bees and pay the fine. But bees are not listed in the covenant as prohibited, I said, keeping my voice calm. I read Section 7.3.4 very carefully. Bees fall under agricultural operations, Brenda said flatly. Patricia was very clear about that. Can I speak with Patricia directly? She is very busy. You can submit a written appeal, but the fine stands until the board reviews it. I spent the rest of the day drafting an appeal letter. I explained that bees were not livestock, that they were not agricultural operations by any reasonable definition, and that they were actually beneficial for the neighborhood gardens and landscaping. I cited the fact that many cities across America were actively encouraging urban beekeeping. I even included research about declining bee populations and the environmental importance of pollinators. I printed it out, signed it, and dropped it off at the HOA office that same afternoon. 2 weeks passed without a response. I kept checking my mailbox, hoping for some acknowledgement of my appeal. Instead, I got another letter. This one informed me that my appeal had been denied, and that the fine had now increased to $1,000 due to continued non-compliance. The letter also stated that if I did not remove the bees within 7 days, I would face additional daily fines of $100. I was furious. This was absurd. I decided I needed to attend the next HOA board meeting and speak directly to these people. According to the community calendar posted online, The next meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. That Tuesday, I walked into the community center meeting room and found about 15 folding chairs set up facing a long table. Patricia Henderson sat in the middle, flanked by 4 other board members. Patricia was exactly what I had imagined. A woman in her early 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair, too much makeup, and a pantsuit that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager." She was shuffling papers and talking in hushed tones to the man on her right. I took a seat in the 3rd row. A few other residents trickled in, but most of the chairs remained empty. At 7:05, Patricia called the meeting to order by tapping a gavel that seemed ridiculously official for a suburban HOA. "We have several items on the agenda tonight," she said, her voice sharp and commanding. "First, we need to discuss the pool furniture replacement. Second, the landscape lighting proposal. And third, ongoing violation enforcement." They spent 45 minutes debating whether to buy blue or green cushions for the pool deck chairs. I resisted the urge to check my phone. Finally, when they moved to violation enforcement, Patricia pulled out a file. "We have several outstanding violations," she said. "The Martins have an unauthorized doormat. The Chens painted their front door without approval, and Adrian Quincy is operating an illegal bee farm." "It is not a farm," I said loudly, standing up, "and I am here to address this." Patricia looked at me with cold eyes. "Mr. Quincy, there is a public comment period at the end of the meeting. With all due respect, you are discussing my property right now. I would like to respond." One of the other board members, an older man with gray hair, leaned forward. "Let him speak, Patricia. We should hear both sides." Patricia pursed her lips but gestured for me to continue. I walked to the front of the room. "I have 3 bee hives in my backyard. They are quiet, they bother no one, and they are not prohibited by our covenant. I have read the rules thoroughly. Bees are not livestock. They are not an agricultural operation by any reasonable standard." "They produce honey," Patricia interrupted. "That is agriculture." "By that logic, anyone with a tomato plant is running a farm," I said. "The covenant does not prohibit bees. This fine is arbitrary and unreasonable." A woman in the back spoke up. "I think the bees are wonderful. My garden has never looked better." Patricia shot her a look. "That is irrelevant. The board has determined that bees constitute a violation." "Based on what authority?" I asked. "Based on my interpretation as HOA president," Patricia said. "And the board has voted to uphold the fine." "When did you vote?" "We held an emergency session 2 weeks ago." "Without notifying me?" "Without letting me present my case." The gray-haired board member shifted uncomfortably. "Patricia, I do not recall voting on this." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "It was an email vote, Robert. I sent it to everyone." "I never received an email," another board member said, a younger woman with red hair. This was getting interesting. Patricia was clearly making things up as she went along. I pressed forward. "I want to see the minutes from this emergency session and the vote tally," I said. Patricia's face flushed. "This meeting is not about procedure. It is about compliance. Remove the bees or face escalating fines." "I am not removing them," I said firmly, "and I will not pay a fine for something that is not actually prohibited." I walked out of that meeting knowing this was going to get worse before it got better. What I did not know was just how much worse, or how bizarre the whole situation would become. The next morning, I found another letter in my mailbox. The fine had increased to $2,000. Patricia had apparently decided that my refusal to comply at the meeting constituted another week of violations, so she had added daily fines retroactively. The math did not even make sense, but that seemed to be beside the point. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Martin Shepard, and he specialized in property law. His office was in downtown Scottsdale, and he agreed to see me the next day. Martin was in his 60s, with a calm demeanor and a cluttered desk covered in legal pads and case files. I explained the entire situation, showing him all the letters and my copy of the covenant. He read through everything carefully, occasionally making notes. Finally, he looked up at me. "This is harassment," he said simply. "The covenant does not prohibit bees. She has no legal standing to fine you." So what do I do? You have a few options. You can file a lawsuit against the HOA for wrongful fines. You can also file a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA regulations. Or you can wait and see if they actually try to place a lien on your property, which would give us grounds for a more substantial legal action. What do you recommend? I recommend sending them a cease and desist letter first. Let them know you have legal representation and that you will pursue action if they continue. Sometimes that is enough to make them back down. HOA boards hate legal fees. I paid Martin for his time and left his office feeling slightly better. He drafted the cease and desist letter that afternoon, and I had it hand-delivered to the HOA office the next morning. For about a week, things were quiet. I started to think maybe the letter had worked. Then I came home from a grocery store run to find Patricia Henderson standing in my driveway with a man in a uniform who appeared to be some kind of inspector. "What is going on?" I asked, getting out of my car with bags of groceries in my hands. "This is Daniel Torres from the county health department," Patricia said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I filed a complaint about a potential public health hazard on your property." I set the groceries down. "You did what?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. He was young, probably in his late 20s, and clearly did not want to be in the middle of this. "Sir, we received a complaint about beehives. I am here to inspect and make sure everything is up to code." "Bees are not a health hazard," I said. "That is what I need to determine," Daniel said. "Can I see the hives?" I led them both to my backyard. My 3 hives sat peacefully near the back fence, surrounded by blooming desert wildflowers. The bees were busy, flying in and out, doing their bee things. Daniel spent about 10 minutes examining them, checking the distance from property lines, looking at the hive construction. Finally, he straightened up and made some notes on his clipboard. "Everything looks fine," he said. "The hives are well maintained, they are the proper distance from the property line, and there is no health hazard." Patricia's face went red. "But they are bees. They could sting someone." "Bees are legal in Scottsdale," Daniel said, "as long as they are properly managed, which these appear to be. I cannot issue any violation." "I was stung last week walking past this house," Patricia said. "Did you report it to a doctor?" Daniel asked. Patricia stammered. "Well, no, but it hurt." "Madam, I cannot do anything based on an unverified claim. There is no violation here." He turned to me. "Sir, you are in full compliance. Have a good day." He left, and Patricia stood there in my backyard, fuming. I crossed my arms and waited for her to leave. "This is not over," she said. "I will find a way to remove those bees." "Why do you even care?" I asked. "They are not bothering anyone. They are helping the neighborhood gardens." "They are a violation of community standards," Patricia said, "and I do not appreciate your attitude or your lawyer's threatening letter." "Then stop fining me for something that is not actually prohibited." She turned and walked through my side gate, slamming it behind her. I stood there among my bees, wondering what she would try next. The answer came 2 weeks later. I received a notice that the HOA was calling a special meeting to vote on an amendment to the covenant that would explicitly prohibit bees. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, and all homeowners were invited to attend and vote. This was a problem. If they amended the covenant, they would have legitimate grounds to force me to remove my hives. I needed to stop this amendment from passing. I spent the next week going door to door in my neighborhood, talking to my neighbors. Most people had no idea there was even a controversy about bees. Several told me they loved seeing the bees in their gardens. A few did not care one way or another. Only one person, an elderly man named Harold, said he supported Patricia. "I am allergic to bees," he explained. "If I get stung, I could die." "I understand," I said. "But my bees are in my backyard, far from the street. The bees you see in your garden are probably wild ones, not mine." He considered this. "I suppose that is true. I see bees everywhere, not just near your house." By the end of the week, I had talked to about 40 homeowners. Most of them promised to attend the meeting and vote against the amendment. I felt cautiously optimistic. The Thursday meeting was packed. The community center room was standing room only, with at least 80 people crowded in. Patricia looked surprised and slightly nervous at the turnout. Apparently, she had expected the usual handful of attendees. She called the meeting to order and quickly moved to the main agenda item. "We are here to vote on an amendment to Section 7.3.4 of the Covenant, which would add bees to the list of prohibited animals and agricultural operations." "I would like to speak against this amendment," I said, standing up. Patricia tried to ignore me, but Robert, the gray-haired board member, spoke up. He should be allowed to speak. I walked to the front. "I know most of you do not know me well. I am Adrian Quincy, and I live on Desert Vista Drive. 6 months ago, I started keeping bees as a hobby. I have 3 hives in my backyard, far from any neighboring property. The bees are healthy, well managed, and they are providing real benefits to our community. Have you noticed your gardens doing better this year? That is because of increased pollination." A woman in the front row nodded enthusiastically. I continued. "This amendment is not about community standards or safety. It is a personal vendetta by Patricia Henderson because I refuse to pay an unjust fine. If you vote for this amendment, you are setting a precedent that the HOA board can create arbitrary rules to target individual homeowners. Today, it is my bees. Tomorrow, it might be your vegetable garden or your bird feeder or anything else the board decides they do not like." Several people murmured in agreement. Patricia stood up, her face tight. "Mr. Quincy is making this personal when it is not. This is about maintaining property values and ensuring the safety of our community." "How do bees lower property values?" someone called out. Patricia floundered. "They just do. It is common sense." "I think they increase property values," another person said. "Environmental features are attractive to buyers." The debate went on for another 30 minutes. More people spoke in favor of keeping the bees than against them. Finally, Patricia called for a vote. According to the HOA rules, an amendment required a 2/3 majority of homeowners present. The vote was 47 against the amendment and 19 in favor. The amendment failed. Patricia looked like she had swallowed a lemon. She gavelled the meeting closed and walked out quickly, followed by 2 of the board members who had voted in favor. Robert and the red-haired woman, whose name I learned was Susan, stayed behind. "I am sorry about all this," Robert said to me. "Patricia has been increasingly difficult over the past year. She takes things too personally." "I just want to keep my bees and be left alone," I said. "You should come to the next regular board meeting," Susan said. "We might need new leadership." That was interesting, but I was not sure I wanted to get that involved in HOA politics. I thanked them and went home, relieved that the immediate threat was over. For about 2 months, everything was quiet. Summer hit hard in Scottsdale, with temperatures pushing 115 degrees. My bees slowed down their activity during the hottest parts of the day, but they were still productive. I had harvested my first batch of honey in June, getting about 40 pounds of beautiful amber liquid from my 3 hives. I bottled it in mason jars and gave some to my neighbors. Everyone who tried it said it was the best honey they had ever tasted. Then in early August, I received an unexpected visit. I was in my garage working on a project when a car pulled up and 2 people got out. One was Patricia Henderson. The other was a man I did not recognize, tall and thin with slicked back hair and an expensive-looking suit. I walked down my driveway to meet them. "What can I do for you?" The man extended his hand. "Mr. Quincy, my name is Gregory Vance. I am a business consultant and Patricia has told me about your honey operation." I shook his hand cautiously. "It is not an operation, it is a hobby." "That is exactly what makes it so interesting," Gregory said with a wide smile. "Artisanal, small batch, local honey is very marketable right now. I have connections with several high-end grocery stores and restaurants in the Phoenix area. I think we could do very well together." I looked at Patricia, confused. "You spent months trying to get rid of my bees, and now you want to sell my honey." Patricia had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I may have been hasty in my initial reaction. "After thinking about it more, I realized that your bees could be an asset to the community." "An asset," I repeated flatly. "Think about it," Gregory said. "Meadowbrook Hills honey. We could brand it as a premium community product. I could handle all the marketing and distribution. You would just need to produce the honey. We would split the profits 60-40. 60-40 in whose favor? Well, mine, of course. I am bringing the business expertise and connections." I almost laughed. "You are unbelievable, both of you. You tried to fine me thousands of dollars. You called the health department on me. You tried to change the HOA rules to force me out, and now you want to profit from my work." "I am offering you an opportunity," Gregory said, his smile not wavering. "I am not interested. Please leave my property." Patricia stepped forward. "Adrian, be reasonable. This could be good for everyone." "No, the answer is no. Now please leave before I call the police for trespassing." They left, but I had a sinking feeling this was not over. I was right. A week later, I noticed bees around my hives that looked different. They were slightly larger and more aggressive. I did some research and realized with horror that someone had introduced Africanized honeybees near my property. Africanized bees, sometimes called killer bees, could infiltrate and take over European honeybee hives. They were much more defensive and dangerous. I immediately called an experienced beekeeper I had met during my training class. Her name was Margaret, and she had been keeping bees for over 20 years. She came over that afternoon and examined my hives. "You have got a problem," she said. "There are definitely some Africanized genetics showing up here. Where did they come from?" "I have no idea," I said, but I had a strong suspicion. "You need to requeen your hives as soon as possible," Margaret said. "Replace the queens with known European stock. Otherwise, these hives will become too aggressive to manage safely." She helped me order new queens and walked me through the requeening process. It took about 2 weeks, but eventually my hives settled down and returned to their normal gentle behavior. The whole incident cost me about $300 and countless hours of worry. I could not prove anything, but I was certain Patricia or Gregory had something to do with it. The timing was too convenient, right after I had rejected their business proposal. In early September, I got a call from Susan, the red-haired board member. "Adrian, I thought you should know that Patricia is resigning from the board," she said. "Really? Why?" "Several reasons. Robert and I have been pushing back on her more aggressive enforcement policies, and honestly, I think the failed bee amendment embarrassed her. She does not like losing." "Who will replace her as president? We are having an election next month. You should consider running. I really do not think I am qualified. You are more qualified than you think, and you actually care about being fair, which is more than I can say for some people. I told her I would think about it, but I was not seriously considering it. I just wanted to keep my head down and avoid more drama. Then I got a call from Margaret. Adrian, I heard something disturbing. A woman matching Patricia Henderson's description was asking around at the Arizona Beekeepers Association meeting about how to introduce Africanized bees to an area. My suspicions were confirmed. Did anyone help her? No, of course not. It is actually illegal to intentionally release Africanized bees in Arizona, but several people remembered her because she was being really pushy about it. Would anyone be willing to testify to that? Probably, if it came to that. Why? I called Martin Shepard, my lawyer, and explained the situation. He listened carefully and then let out a low whistle. If she deliberately introduced Africanized bees near your property, that is criminal. It is reckless endangerment at minimum, possibly bioterrorism depending on how aggressive the prosecutor wants to be. What should I do? Document everything. Get statements from Margaret and anyone else who heard Patricia asking about Africanized bees. I will contact the Scottsdale Police Department and see if they want to investigate. The police investigation moved slowly. A detective named Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case. She interviewed me, Margaret, and several people from the Beekeeping Association. She also interviewed Patricia, who vehemently denied everything. It is his word against mine, Patricia told Detective Morrison, according to the report I later saw. I never introduced any bees. I do not even know how to do that. But Detective Morrison was thorough. She pulled Patricia's cell phone records and found that she had called Gregory Vance multiple times in the days before the Africanized bees appeared. When questioned, Gregory cracked almost immediately. Patricia asked me to find someone who could help discourage Adrian from keeping bees, Gregory admitted. I thought she just meant talking to him. I did not know she was going to do something crazy. But phone records showed that Gregory had contacted a man named Jesse Briggs, who had a criminal record for wildlife trafficking. Jesse, when confronted by police, admitted that Gregory had paid him $2,000 to release Africanized bee swarms near my property. The lady wanted to scare him or make his bees dangerous so he would get rid of them, Jesse told police. I told them it was illegal, but they paid me anyway. With this evidence, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed charges against Patricia Henderson and Gregory Vance in late October. Patricia was charged with reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit criminal damage, and violation of Arizona's agricultural bioterrorism statutes. Gregory faced similar charges, plus solicitation of a crime. Jesse Briggs was charged as well, but he got a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony. The case made local news. HOA president charged in bee attack plot, read the headline in the Arizona Republic. The story detailed the entire bizarre saga, from the initial fines to the criminal charges. I declined to be interviewed, but several of my neighbors spoke to reporters about how they supported my beekeeping and were shocked by Patricia's actions. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA board held an emergency meeting and unanimously voted to remove Patricia from the board and rescind all fines against me. They also issued a formal apology and offered to reimburse me for my legal fees. I accepted the apology, but told them to donate the money to a local environmental education program instead. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for January, but her lawyer negotiated a plea deal in December. She pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment and conspiracy charges. The bioterrorism charge was dropped. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 10 years. Gregory Vance got a similar deal, though his fine was lower since he claimed he did not fully understand what Patricia was planning. Jesse Briggs served 6 months in county jail. Through all of this, my bees thrived. I continued producing honey, and word spread about its quality. Local restaurants started asking if I would sell to them. I set up a small online store and started selling at the local farmers market on Saturday mornings. It was never going to be a full-time income, but it was a nice supplement and it got me out of the house. In November, the HOA held elections for the board. Robert remained on the board, as did Susan. 3 new members were elected, all of them reasonable people who just wanted to maintain the community without drama. Susan was elected as the new president. Her first act was to officially amend the covenant to explicitly allow beekeeping, with reasonable guidelines about hive placement and maintenance. The vote passed with overwhelming support. I ended up harvesting about 120 pounds of honey that first full year. Every jar had a simple label: Desert Vista Honey, Scottsdale, Arizona. I sold them for $12 each, which was actually below market rate for local raw honey, but I did not care about maximizing profit. I just enjoyed the work and the connection to my community. Several other homeowners in Meadowbrook Hills started their own beehives. By the following spring, we had a small but active beekeeping group that met monthly to share tips and experiences. Margaret came to several meetings as a guest speaker. The neighborhood gardens flourished with all the increased pollination. I saw Patricia once more in early February at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, and I was loading up on vegetables for dinner. We made eye contact for a moment. She looked tired and older than I remembered. I nodded at her, not in a friendly way but not hostile either, just acknowledging that we were 2 human beings who had been through something ridiculous together. She looked away quickly and hurried off. I did not feel triumphant or vindicated. Mostly I just felt sad that it had all escalated so absurdly. If Patricia had just left me alone from the beginning, none of this would have happened. She would still be HOA president, living her life. Instead, she had a criminal record and probably faced a civil lawsuit from the HOA's insurance company. But I also learned something important through the whole experience. Communities work best when people approach problems with curiosity and openness, rather than immediate judgment and control. Patricia's first instinct when she saw my beehives was to stamp them out, to assert authority, to enforce conformity. She never asked why I had bees, what benefits they might provide, or whether they were actually causing any problems. Spring arrived in Scottsdale with an explosion of desert wildflowers. The winter rains had been good, and the Sonoran Desert was doing its spectacular bloom thing. My bees were incredibly active, and I knew the spring honey harvest would be exceptional. One Saturday morning at the farmer's market, a young couple approached my booth. The woman was pregnant, and they were looking at my honey jars with interest. "Is this really local?" the man asked. "Made in my backyard about 3 miles from here," I said. "We just moved to Scottsdale from Portland," the woman said. "We are trying to find good local producers. This is exactly what we were hoping to find." They bought 4 jars and asked if I would be there next week. I assured them I would. As they walked away, I looked around at the busy market. There were vendors selling vegetables, baked goods, handmade crafts, and other local products. Families were wandering through, enjoying the warm morning. A few booths down, I saw Margaret selling honeycomb and beeswax candles. She waved at me. This was what community was supposed to be. People making things, sharing things, supporting each other. not fighting over arbitrary rules or trying to control what neighbors did in their own yards. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Board meeting Tuesday at 7 p.m. Can you give a presentation on the beekeeping program? Want to feature it in the community newsletter? I texted back that I would be happy to. It was strange how things had turned around. A year ago, the HOA was trying to fine me into submission. Now they wanted to celebrate what I was doing. That Tuesday, I brought samples of my latest honey harvest to the board meeting. About a dozen residents attended, including several of the new beekeepers. I gave a short presentation about the benefits of urban beekeeping, showing photos of my hives and explaining the process. Robert tried the honey and his eyes widened. "This is incredible, Adrian. Have you thought about entering any competitions?" I had not, actually. "You should. The Arizona State Fair has a honey competition every October. I bet you would do well." Susan announced that the HOA newsletter would feature an article about the neighborhood beekeeping program, along with information for other residents who might be interested in starting their own hives. She also suggested organizing a community honey tasting event in the fall, where all the neighborhood beekeepers could share their harvests. "We could make it a fundraiser for local schools," she said. "Charge $5 admission, have some educational displays, maybe even get Margaret to do a live beekeeping demonstration." Everyone loved the idea. We scheduled it for early October after the summer heat broke but before it got too cool. The months passed quickly. Summer was brutal as always, with temperatures regularly hitting 115 degrees. My bees hunkered down during the worst of it, but they survived. I made sure they had plenty of water and shade. In late August, I got an unexpected email from Gregory Vance. He was still awaiting sentencing, out on bail and apparently having second thoughts about his life choices. "Adrian," the email read, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was wrong and stupid. I let Patricia convince me that there was easy money to be made, and I did not think about the consequences or the ethics. I am truly sorry for the harm I caused you and your bees. I hope your beekeeping is going well. Sincerely, Gregory." I stared at the email for a long time, trying to decide how to respond or if I should respond at all. Finally, I wrote back, "I appreciate the apology. I hope you learn from this and make better choices in the future. Good luck." It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was not anger either. Just acknowledgement and moving forward. The community honey tasting event in October was a huge success. We set it up in the community center courtyard, with tables displaying different honey varieties from the 6 beekeepers in our neighborhood. Margaret brought an observation hive so people could safely watch bees at work behind glass. A local chef gave a cooking demonstration using honey in various recipes. Over 200 people attended, including residents from neighboring subdivisions who had heard about it. We raised over $1,000 for the local elementary school's science program. The local news sent a reporter, and we got a nice feature on the evening broadcast about urban beekeeping and community engagement. During the event, an older woman approached my table. She introduced herself as Helen Martinez, and she lived 3 streets over from me. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I was one of the people who voted in favor of banning bees at that meeting last year. Patricia had convinced me they were dangerous. But my garden has never been better and this honey is amazing. I was wrong." "Thank you for saying that," I said, "and thank you for coming today." "I am actually thinking about starting my own hive," she said. "Would you be willing to mentor someone?" "Absolutely. We have a beekeeping group that meets monthly. You would be very welcome." She signed up for our next meeting and left with 2 jars of honey and a smile. As the sun set and the event wound down, I helped pack up tables and displays. Susan came over, looking pleased. "This was wonderful, Adrian. Thank you for being so patient with all of us. The community is better because you did not just give up and leave." "I thought about it," I admitted. "When things were really bad, I thought about just selling the house and moving somewhere without an HOA. I am glad you stayed." That night, I sat in my backyard with a glass of wine, listening to the quiet desert evening. My bees were settled in their hives for the night. The temperature had finally dropped below 80 degrees. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I thought about the journey from that first ridiculous violation notice to this moment of peace. It had been stressful and absurd and occasionally frightening. But it had also taught me things about standing up for what is right, about community, about the importance of questioning authority when authority is wrong. My phone rang. It was Martin Shepard, my lawyer. "Adrian, I wanted to let you know that the HOA's insurance company settled the civil case. They are paying your legal fees in full, plus additional damages for the stress and harm caused by Patricia's actions." "How much?" $15,000. "The check should arrive next week." I thanked him and hung up. $15,000 was not nothing, but honestly, the money was not the point. The point was the principle. The point was that you could not just bully people with made-up rules and expect no consequences. I donated $5,000 of the settlement to the Arizona Beekeepers Association to support their educational programs. I used another $5,000 to upgrade my beekeeping equipment and add 2 more hives. The remaining $5,000 went into savings. The following spring, I entered my honey in the Arizona State Fair competition like Robert had suggested. I submitted 3 varieties: spring wildflower, summer mesquite, and fall desert blossom. To my surprise and delight, the spring wildflower honey won second place in its category, and the summer mesquite won first. The blue ribbon came with a small cash prize and a certificate. I framed the certificate and hung it in my home office, next to my beekeeping class completion certificate and a photo of my hives. They were reminders of an unexpected journey and lessons learned. Helen Martinez did start her own hive, with my help and Margaret's guidance. She was a natural beekeeper, patient and observant. By the end of her first season, her bees were thriving. 2 other neighbors started hives that year as well. The Meadowbrook Hills Beekeepers became an official club, with monthly meetings and a lending library of beekeeping books and equipment. We organized group orders for supplies to get bulk discounts. We helped each other with hive inspections and shared strategies for dealing with pests and diseases. Susan served as HOA president for 2 years and then stepped down, satisfied that she had helped restore sanity to the board. Robert took over as president, and he was even more laid back than Susan. Under his leadership, the HOA focused on actual community building rather than rule enforcement. Violations were handled with conversation and cooperation rather than immediate fines. I never did see Patricia Henderson again after that brief encounter at the grocery store. I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she moved to Tucson after completing her probation. I hope she found some peace and learned from her mistakes, but I did not spend much time thinking about her. My beekeeping hobby continued to grow, though I was careful to keep it manageable. I did not want it to become stressful or feel like a burden. 5 hives felt like the right number, producing enough honey to sell at farmers' markets and to local restaurants, but not so much that it took over my life. I still worked full-time as a software developer, still enjoyed the quiet of my home office, still appreciated the simple pleasure of stepping outside to check on my bees during work breaks. The balance felt right. One afternoon in late May, Almost 3 years after the whole saga began, I was harvesting honey when a moving truck pulled up to the house next door. A young family was moving in, parents with 2 small children. I watched them unload boxes and furniture, remembering my own move-in day years ago. The father noticed me in my backyard and waved. I waved back. A few minutes later, he walked over to the fence. "Hi, I am David Chen. We just bought the place. Adrian Quincy, welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks. Hey, are those beehives? Here we go," I thought. But David was smiling, looking interested rather than concerned. "Yes, I keep bees. I hope that is okay with you." "That is awesome. We were hoping to find a neighborhood with some character. My wife loves gardening. I bet she will be thrilled about the bees." We chatted for a few more minutes. David asked intelligent questions about the bees and seemed genuinely enthusiastic. His wife, Jennifer, came over and was equally positive. Their kids wanted to know if they could see the bees up close sometime, and I promised to arrange a safe viewing with proper protective gear. This was how it was supposed to be. Neighbors talking, showing interest, building connections. Not fear, not rules, not conflict. That evening I bottled the honey I had harvested. 24 jars of beautiful golden liquid, each one representing thousands of bee flights. Millions of flowers visited, the accumulated work of an entire colony working in mysterious cooperation. I labeled each jar carefully, dated them, and set them aside to crystallize slightly before selling. My phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. She was organizing a state beekeepers conference in Phoenix for the fall and wanted to know if I would be willing to speak on a panel about urban beekeeping challenges. I said yes, immediately. A few years ago, I never would have imagined standing in front of a room full of people talking about bees and HOA regulations, but here I was. The conference was in September, held at a hotel near Sky Harbor Airport. About 300 beekeepers attended from all over Arizona and neighboring states. I sat on a panel with 4 other urban beekeepers, and we discussed various challenges: regulations, neighbor relations, space limitations, heat management in desert climates. When it came time for questions, a woman in the audience stood up. "How do you handle homeowner associations?" she asked. "I want to start beekeeping, but I am afraid my HOA will not allow it." I told my story, keeping it brief but hitting the main points. The room was silent as I described Patricia's escalating actions and the eventual criminal charges. When I finished, several people applauded. "The key lesson," I concluded, "is to know your rights and stand firm when you are in the right, but also try to educate and build bridges when possible." Most conflicts can be resolved through dialogue if both parties are willing. Unfortunately, sometimes you encounter people who are not willing, and then you need to be prepared to defend yourself legally. After the panel, several people came up to thank me for sharing my story. One man said he was going through a similar situation in Temp and asked for my lawyer's contact information. I gave him Martin Shepard's card and wished him luck. The conference reminded me that my experience, while dramatic, was not unique. Across the country, people were pushing back against overly restrictive HOA rules, fighting for the right to garden, to keep bees, to install solar panels, to paint their doors unusual colors. Each small victory contributed to a larger shift in how we thought about community governance and property rights. Flying home that evening, looking down at the sprawling lights of Phoenix, I felt grateful for how things had turned out. Yes, I had been stressed and angry and worried. Yes, I had spent money on lawyers and time dealing with nonsense. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I thought, that communities could change for the better, and that sometimes standing up for something small like keeping bees could have ripple effects you never anticipated. The neighborhood beekeeping program inspired other environmental initiatives in Meadowbrook Hills. Someone started a community composting program. Another resident organized a native plant landscaping group to replace thirsty grass lawns with desert-adapted gardens. The HOA newsletter, once filled with violation notices and stern reminders, now featured articles about sustainability, wildlife-friendly gardening, and community events. Property values in the neighborhood actually increased, not despite these changes but because of them. Young families and environmentally conscious buyers were specifically seeking out Meadowbrook Hills because of its reputation as a progressive, nature-friendly community. The real estate agents started mentioning the beekeeping program in their listings. Robert, as HOA president, liked to joke that I had accidentally made everyone richer. I did not think it was about the money, but I did not argue with him. By the 4th year, I had perfected my beekeeping routine. I knew the rhythms of my hives, could predict swarms before they happened, managed pests with minimal intervention. The bees and I had reached an understanding. I provided them with a safe home and took some of their surplus honey. They tolerated my periodic inspections and went about their business of being bees. I sold my honey at farmers' markets, through a small online store, and to 3 local restaurants that featured it on their menus. One restaurant, a high-end place in Old Town Scottsdale, created a dessert specifically around my honey. Lavender panna cotta with desert wildflower honey reduction. The chef told me customers raved about it. The money was nice, covering the costs of my equipment and supplies with enough left over for the occasional splurge. But the real reward was the work itself, the connection to the natural world, the satisfaction of creating something pure and valuable with my own hands and the labor of my bees. I thought sometimes about Patricia Henderson and what had driven her to such extremes. Was it a need for control, a fear of change, a fundamental belief that rules mattered more than people? I would never know. But her actions had inadvertently created something positive, forcing me to stand up and, in standing up, building something larger than myself. On a cool December evening, almost 4 years after the whole saga began, the neighborhood held its annual holiday party at the community center. Someone had organized a white elephant gift exchange. I brought a gift basket of honey and beeswax products. The party was crowded and warm, full of neighbors I now considered friends. David and Jennifer Chen were there with their kids, who had become junior beekeeping enthusiasts under my tutelage. Helen Martinez brought her famous tamales. Robert and Susan reminisced about the old days of HOA drama like war veterans swapping stories. During the gift exchange, my honey basket was stolen 3 times, the maximum allowed by the rules. It finally ended up with a teenager named Marcus who lived down the street. He seemed genuinely excited about it, which made me happy. As the party wound down and people started heading home, Susan pulled me aside. "I never properly thanked you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up. For making this place better. It would have been easy to just move away and let Patricia win. But you stayed and fought and turned something negative into something wonderful. That takes character." "I just wanted to keep my bees," I said. "It was never just about the bees, though, was it? It was about principle, about not letting bullies win, about building the kind of community we want to live in." She was right, of course. It had never been just about the bees. Walking home that night under a clear desert sky, I thought about the journey. From that first violation notice to this moment of contentment and community. The path had been strange and difficult, and sometimes scary. But it had led somewhere good. My bees were sleeping in their hives, clustered together for warmth against the cool winter night. In a few months, Spring would arrive and the desert would bloom again and my bees would burst forth with renewed energy. The cycle would continue, as it had for millions of years, long before HOAs and property covenants and human disputes. There was something humbling and grounding about that perspective. My drama with Patricia Henderson was less than a blink in the long history of bees and flowers and honey. But for me, for my neighbors, for the community we were building, it had mattered. Small actions and small stands created the fabric of daily life. I went inside, poured myself a whiskey, and sat by the window looking out at my backyard. Everything was quiet and still. Tomorrow I would check the hives, maybe extract some winter honey if there was surplus, definitely attend the monthly beekeepers' meeting. But tonight, I just sat and appreciated the peace I had fought for and earned. The whole experience had taught me that justice sometimes comes slowly and in unexpected forms. Patricia had faced legal consequences for her actions. I had kept my bees and built something meaningful. The community had learned and grown. Nobody had gotten everything they wanted, but the outcome was fair and good. That was enough. That was more than enough.